Host Christene Marie. Thank you for joining me tonight. It's such a privilege to be able to join you and hang out and talk about things that matter. For a lot of you, we've been growing. We've been creating a little community online, which has been so cool. And for those of you who are new to the Knowing Show, we talk about how to cultivate our intelligences, how to effectively be more human, more alive. And the reason why this is so important, not just from this perspective of let's live a full and holistic life, but especially in this age where, as we're looking tonight and every night at cultivating human intelligence, we are up against another intelligence, an artificial one. And y'all, we're finding more and more people are trading AI companions for human companions and human relationships. So this conversation, this time of really looking in the mirror and asking, okay, how do I become the fullness that I can be, is so critically important, because we are not just competing against technology in terms of attention, where we're constantly being distracted. There's constant stimulus, but now we actually are at risk of being replaced. I have heard so many stories of husbands leaving their families because of AI and he wants to have a romantic relationship. I've heard of women and the AI companion dynamic that they get that is so much more satisfying than their own partner. I'm seeing people literally taking their lives because of a story I just read a couple days ago of this guy who was convinced that, he would be able to be with his AI companion in the afterlife. It is wild what we're experiencing. And so this show is purely dedicated to the cultivation of human intelligence. Yes, an understanding of artificial intelligence sometimes, to make sure that we are staying with the times and keeping aware with what's going on in the world. But it has never been more important, it doesn't behoove us more at any time in human history than now to cultivate who we are as we're looking in the face of this future, of which we really don't know. There's nobody who is an expert at AI because it's constantly evolving and constantly changing. So what we can become an expert in is you and me, is in the human being, to maintain even the desire to exist in this physical world. We're so existing on this kind of existential plane in terms of like wondering what's coming, or also existing on the digital plane, not actually here and now. So without further ado, we are diving into this conversation tonight around how do we spend our time. And I'm excited to talk about this, because from a business perspective, I just was meeting with a roofing company actually this afternoon. We're talking about different marketing tactics and branding tactics and what's really going to yield the most return on the investment that we can make. And as we were talking, we're talking about different digital tactics, traditional tactics, radio, TV. We're talking about the whole gamut of where we could be investing money. But y'all, the thing is that you and I, each one of us has a similar decision to make every single day, except it's not necessarily that we're making an exchange of money, but we're making an exchange of time. How are we spending our time and allocating our time, which is, at the end of the day, a very precious resource. We can't go mine more time. We can only use what we have. And so that is the one limiting asset in our lives. You can always go make more money. You can always maybe make more kids, but you cannot make more time. And so to that point, this question of how do I spend it? How do I actually allocate? What am I exchanging for this precious resource, the most precious of my life, which is time? How are we spending our time? And the question that I want to be asking each one of us is, what is the return that's being yielded for the investment? We talk about ROI in business, return on investment, and so often it's in a monetary state. But return on investment in terms of our time. Where are we yielding the greatest results? Where are we yielding the greatest return for how we're expending our time? So before we continue, I just want to jump here in the chat. Benny, hello. I'm so glad to see you. Kevy, good evening. Thanks for joining. I4th, hey, from New Orleans. I'm scrolling on. I just wanted to say hi. I am going to be in New Orleans in a couple weeks. I'm going to an event. I'm so excited. A. Alvin, hello. Thanks for joining. Have a nice night. I'm enjoying my night. I'm so glad. Patrick Rowe, anger's away. I love that. Anchors away, my girl. I love this. L4th says, interesting there. I want to be more into investing. Time is the only thing anyone has, DJ says. Hi, DJ. Ooh, money. I love money so very much, Patrick says. Mr. David, hello. Thanks for joining. In the earthly world, it's so true. Randy Jake, hello. Good to see you. DJ says, what is ROI? Return on investment. So really what we're talking about tonight, as we're talking about how are we spending our time, we're taking the approach from time is our greatest resource in so many ways. That is something we cannot get more of. Now, you can wake up early or go to bed later, but really, we only have 18 hours a day, 20 hours a day, probably at best or at most for most of us. And so how are we going to use that? What and how will we spend this time that is allocated to every single one of us, that then it's like a bank. I'm putting out an hour of my time. What's the return on that in terms of my investment? And so you can look at it in terms of monetary. So that's how a lot of people will charge. That's actually how I've charged a lot growing in my business was, okay, an hour of my time is X amount of dollars. But y'all, we need to think about this beyond business. We're not taking this question and applying it to our personal lives. When we go home at night, what's the first thing we do? Do we turn on the TV? Do we cook dinner? Do we go to the gym? Do we spend time with our friends? Do we make a phone call? Do we read a book? Do we pick up our phone? How are we spending our time? What's the hour exchange? What is the return on the hourly investment of our time? And again, it's not money that we're talking about here. Sure, maybe you go to dinner and you spend some, $200 for a meal for your whole family. All right, well, what was the yield from that? Did you have good conversations? Was there any kind of cool breakthrough where you really got to know each other better? What about, honestly, being able to make a new business connection? Maybe you were going out to dinner with some business partners. So that $200 for dinner, that's a financial investment. What was the yield? What was the return on that financial investment? Okay, so then taking this example, now we're at home. We're in our home. I just walked in the door from work. What's the first thing I do? We have probably 4 to 6 hours, depending on your time of day when you return home. And this could be regardless if you're a night shift nurse, but let's say you walk home, whatever time it is, you've got 4 to 6 hours before you go to bed. What is the return on that 4 to 6 hours that you're spending in terms of your time? And so this is what I want to dive into in terms of our actions. There is a return on every single action that we make. Every single action that we take, there's always a return. And so we think about it in different categories. On the Knowing Show, we talk about intellectual intelligence, our mind, really cultivating our minds. And for so many of us, we've been cultivating our minds since childhood. We were given books and we went to school and we learned how to read and math and science and history, English. We were taught all these different subjects to cultivate the mind. And then we also have emotional intelligence, which is our soul, where our emotions are. And so it's, okay, how much of my actions are yielding me a return cognitively, intellectually, yielding a return emotionally? Emotionally and cognitively, there's very different actions that would feed either one of these categories. It's kind of like nourishing. We talked, honestly, it was probably a month ago at this point, where we talked about how to recharge. And we talked about how to recharge in each category. How do we recharge intellectually? Reading books? Is it having a stimulating conversation? Maybe joining a mastermind? Honestly, it could even be listening to a podcast. We were talking about how to recharge emotionally. And so that might actually be having a really good conversation with a friend. Maybe it's therapy. Maybe it's meditation. So we were talking about recharging in those ways. But now I want to look at it from the aspect of what action do you take that yields an investment intellectually? What action do you take that yields an investment emotionally? And that could actually, that's not just what am I gaining back, kind of selfishly. It's also, well, what action am I taking, such as, am I going to actually a food pantry and serving that is yielding a return for me emotionally, where, man, I love these people. And it actually is feeding me and nourishing my emotional side to then go and love and give and nurture in that way. Actually, nurturing can be one of the best ways to feed the emotional side of us and the emotional part of us. It yields great return when we go and care for our family, when we care for our community and our children. Same thing goes with the intellectual. When I go and attend a class, when I go and I read a really, really good book, I am yielding a return because of the intellectual stimulation that I get from that investment. And there can even be, then you go to physical intelligence. So we talk about intellectual intelligence, emotional intelligence, physical intelligence. Physically, there's a lot of actions where we can yield results, like working out. You actually yield results. And choosing what we eat. What we eat has such immediate ramifications. We get that investment return almost right away for so many of us, depending on what we eat. And so there's these categories based on it. So it's looking at our actions for each category and really analyzing, okay, well, what's the return that I get by sitting and scrolling? And actually, that's a really genuine question. I'd actually like, if you guys are up for it here in the chat, if you guys are up for talking about this, I'd love to know, because I think there's different returns that each one of us get for being on our phones. And so I'd love to know if you guys are up for sharing in the chat here, what is your return for being on your phone? Anthony says, I'm a man. I don't think about it that way. I just enjoy life. Keep it simple. Anthony, I love that. And I also am curious, could you ever get to a point in your life where maybe because you weren't thinking about it, then you didn't spend your time the way that you would have otherwise if you were not looking at the expenditure of time with intention? All right, I am putting down Better Believe on timeout. I don't know what's happening here, but we're just going to put you on timeout. Okay, so I would love to hear, guys. Patrick says, as long as I got, I don't know, my chopper, a few thousand in the bank, a few thousand coming in the bank. I'm happy. So really, I'm curious, is this something you guys have never thought about in terms of, am I spending my time wisely? Am I actually pleased with the life I'm living? I would love to know if that's something that you guys are actively thinking about. Because here's the thing, when we look back 60 years over our life, 80 years over our life, if we're lucky, 100 years, are we proud of the life we're living? And so often we're living on autopilot. We're living without really paying attention. And so part of this is, man, am I actually living a life right here, right now, that I'm really proud of, that I'm happy with, that I'm making good use of my time? Andra, I'm so glad you're here. Hello. Thanks for hanging out. Luis, peace unstressed myself and learn about other people and their lives from scrolling. I love that, Luis. So you said that, I asked, what do you gain by scrolling? And he says, peace, unstressed, learning about other people and their lives. I love that. And that's such a good perspective. I think that's such a good perspective of, what are you gaining? What's the return on the investment of what you're consuming? A friend of mine, and this is why, Luis, I love that perspective, because none of us are ever going to be able to have the whole perspective alone, hence why we need each other. A friend of mine, their algorithm is really negative, and it actually produces a lot of negative thoughts for them. Whenever they go and pick up their phone, it immediately makes them angry. And so I love that your feed yields peace. It gives you peace. And I think that that's such a beautiful thing. I love that. Ima, hello. I have not put you on timeout. Maybe I did one time, but you've been wonderful ever since. John, hello. John Donald, good to see you. Christopher Adams, hi, my friend. I feel like it's been a long time since I've seen you. It depends on what content you decide to utilize on your phone, and if you decide to apply what you learn or not. What a good point. Yes, exactly. Am I actually putting into practice? And guys, that's actually something really, really interesting with the brain. If we learn something and then we just talk about it, but we never do it, our brain actually doesn't really know the difference. It's like we can trick our brain into having already done it. It's very, very fascinating what happens when we're just sitting around talking and musing, or just sitting and consuming without taking the action associated with that. So good, Christopher Adams. Thank you for saying that. Paxton says, hi, Paxton. I'm not pleased, of course. I don't know how to fix it, though, I guess. So you're not pleased with what you're consuming on your phone, or just how you're spending your time? I feel like, first, thank you for being so honest. I love and so appreciate that. Gary, hello. Thank you. I'm so glad you're here. Perez, hello. Thanks for hanging out. Anthony, I freaking love this. Anthony totally coming in with a contrarian view, which is so good. So good. What's the return of not obsessing about ROI and just being in the moment? I believe in cause and effect. ROI is not applicable in every situation. I love this. Y'all, this is why I love having a conversation, because yes, it's so fascinating. Man, I grew up in such a black and white culture, and it's funny, I still can be tempted towards that in so many ways. And it's so nuanced. You know, asking this question has radically changed my life for the better. I feel like I live awake, considering, am I spending my time intentionally? And is one of the most important conjunctions, because it allows for two very opposing approaches to life, two very seemingly opposing beliefs or thought processes or even actions to coexist together. So, Anthony, what you're saying about being present and the power of here and living in the now, I'm so grateful you brought that up, because that fundamentally also changed my life. And even the decision, I'm intentionally going to be present. The thing is that, am I even aware enough to be present here in this moment? Or am I just on default? Am I just mindlessly scrolling? Or am I intentionally, to what you were saying earlier, Luis, of the benefit that you get from scrolling? I yield peace. I'm going to intentionally sit and scroll, you know, being intentional, being awake. And I think of it as being awake, Anthony, because I really felt like I was living asleep until I started actually being, it's like mindfully present, intentionally present. And then, man, the yield we get in that regard is so huge. So I love that you brought that up. It's such a good I love that. Paxton, I just saw your message earlier. I'm sorry I didn't see that sooner. Being on my phone shuts off my brain and keeps me from ruminating and being depressed. It's a Band-Aid. I found that to be so true for me. You know, when I'm scrolling, it's like, that's actually the thing that takes me away from the present. So, Luis, I think in one sense, you say peace, and that's it's like such a precious word. And is it peace or distraction? And so if you're able to find peace, what a blessing. And I think that that's such a healing modality. And being aware, that's where it's like being conscious. Am I living consciously? Am I being awake again? And so I love this conversation, y'all, because there's so much nuance here. So good. Just scrolling down the chat. Anthony, I love this. Different Anthony Petrick. Anything that brings joy and smiles to others and myself, I'm satisfied. I love that. Spider-Man, I'm going to put you on timeout, because it doesn't seem like you're offering kindness. Vinny, honestly, the return I get for being on my phone is just detaching from reality. In hindsight, it's not good at all. I'm not getting a good return. Y'all, isn't this helpful to be like, okay, for some of us, yes, I'm yielding good results. For others of us, no. Like I have a limit on my Instagram. I don't have TikTok on my phone because I don't want to get sucked into it. But for my Instagram, I think it's a 20-minute or 25-minute limit. So at 5 minutes, it alerts me that I've been on my phone. And I think it's across Facebook too, because I'll get an alert on Facebook and LinkedIn. I think it's all three, where I'll get an alert saying, okay, your time's up. And I can request 5 more minutes, 15 more minutes, or say ignore for the day. And that's been so helpful, because again, so many times that I'm sitting there scrolling, I'm being mindless. I'm actually not, Luis, to your point, finding peace in it or being intentional about it. And even Anthony, Jr., what you're saying about being in the present, I don't find myself being super present when I'm on my phone, for the most part. And so I actually have to have these limits and reminders to be like, oh, wake up. It's like that little jolt of, oh yeah, this isn't actually how I want to be spending my time. Edward, creators after God's own heart. Oh, I love that you said this. So to Edward's point, freaking brilliant. Guys, if we want to be true creators, this is where us detaching from, man, it's like consuming. Once we stop consuming, then we really can start creating. And so this isn't about the phone necessarily. It's just about how am I spending my time and what am I yielding for my time spent? And it could be maybe, honestly, maybe you're reading books that aren't actually yielding you good return. I'm going to say something that probably isn't very popular. My mom didn't let us read like romantic novels growing up because she was like, I don't want that to be in your head. You know, I don't want that to feed you. I don't want you to be consumed with what this not trash. I mean, I'm sure that there's great romance novels, but I don't want your time to be spent consuming something that isn't in alignment with reality, that isn't in alignment with what is going to effectively come. And therefore, it's going to set your expectations for something that isn't real. And I'm so grateful for that because here's the thing. Our actions ultimately inform our thoughts and vice versa. It goes both ways. If we want to change our action, change our thought system, but also if we want to change our thought system, you can also change your action. Go and consume different kinds of information. Consume different inputs because every single input, it's like entering, for the computer programmers out there, it's like your information processing system. Every single input comes in, informs the way that we think, the way that we view the world, and then informs our output. Every single thing we consume changes how we act. So if we want to change how we act, change our input. And if we want to change our input, change your action. Go consume something different. And this is something that's getting a little bit perhaps esoteric, but perhaps not. We'll see. If we want to have a new input and also change our output, so let's say we want to start creating. Well, we can't create anything original if it's sourced from something we consumed. And sure, maybe that consumption aspect is like helping us to think outside the box. But y'all, I've had more creative thought, more creative ideation in business, in terms of even my book. Everything, for the most part, that I've really, truly created has come from the elimination of inputs and from allowing space and kind of the quiet and the solitude to then be able to really think and allow for creation. It's kind of like it's our own, we become our own input, which is so cool. Is that, oh man, it's inspiration, it's revelation. It's like, I didn't even know about that. Y'all, how did Henry Ford ever come up with the automobile? It didn't exist. How did these people who created these inventions that had never once ever been thought of, heard of, ever come into reality, how did they think of that? So often creation comes from like the ether. And I would even say, I think sometimes it even comes divinely inspired, where it's like, whoa, how do I know that? I don't know. And so in the quiet, in the actual elimination of inputs, comes creation. So we're no longer just human consumers, but we're human creators. And so, man, I just think that there's so much there. Matt on Instagram, hello, my friend. I haven't looked too much into that, but I had a friend, you and I could sidebar on this if you want, but a friend of mine, he he was talking about some things that he was doing with very secret, I guess you could say, 3-letter agencies in the government to do with that, which blew my mind. So I know very little about, he's talking about telepathy. I don't know anything about it really, other than that conversation with that guy, which freaking blew my mind. Anyways, okay, going back to this, DJ, the brain is so malleable. All right, I'm just gonna scroll down and catch up here. Jules, hello, I'm so glad to see you. All right, let me scroll into the chat. Sledge, hi from Scotland, cool. Guys, I love how we can hang out from literally all over the world. It's just so cool what the internet does. And here's the thing. We're all consuming right now, right? I'm consuming your words. I'm reading your words. I'm responding back. You're consuming mine. You're responding back. We're having this really cool exchange. Frankly, I'm yielding right now from what you guys are saying and how you guys are thinking and the different perspectives. So just because we're consuming does not mean we are not yielding return on the investment of our time. And if we were to just sit completely in kind of the isolation of our own selves, here's what's fascinating. If we were to completely cut off inputs and completely kind of cut off access to the external world, well, then we might as well go live in the trees and become monks. And because then there's no connection and there's no community to receive the output. If Henry Ford and Elon Musk and Benjamin Franklin, who had all these crazy inventions, were going and sitting in just isolation just solely to create, but didn't have any people to receive what they put out into the world, man, we wouldn't be so far in the sense of innovation. And so there's something about that dance of being faithful with our actions to ensure that, man, what we're creating has a vehicle for expression, a vehicle of being seen and really able to serve. But what that requires is that our very metrics of how we measure success have fundamentally shifted. Now, I'm, yes, valuing being present here in this moment, because we really can't create apart from truly being present to be able to listen, right? And be able to get that access to something that's going to be new. But it also means that we have to be aware that what we value, and how do I even want to say this? What most people value in terms of time expenditure and return for that is likes, followers. It's vanity metrics in so many ways. It's feeding the ego. And so you and I, if we really want our outputs to hold merit, if we really want our actions to have impact, we have to have a fundamentally at our core different value system, because that means pulling away, being in isolation, being in the quiet and the solitude. Am I even able to do that? Or am I actually not healthy enough on an emotional level where I'm going to end up getting depressed or become nihilistic in my isolation? Or am I healthy enough to allow for my isolation to actually be the mechanism and the vehicle for creation that can make real impact in the world? Every single one of our actions is predicated in a belief that you and I hold. That's why we talk so much about the inner cultivation of you and me, because that informs and that changes the way that we interact with the world. I cannot have the impact in terms of my outputs if my inner world is not well and aligned, because then when I withdraw to become the creator, I'm actually not able to even sustain that level of creation because of, it's like the demons within. And here's what's even interesting as I'm even saying that, so many creators in terms of art and music and poetry are like, it's like when you look at their lives, they're very miserable, and they end up ending their lives or their lives end before they can even see the impact of the music and the artistry that came forth from them. So this is a question. Can you, now we're getting existential, so bear with me if you're into this kind of thing. Can we derive meaning, and can we produce something beautiful apart from pain? I love this conversation, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. I really actually would, because I've been debating with myself over this question for probably 6 years. My sister asked me that question. She said, can you come to know yourself? Can you come to know your purpose? Can you come to wake up? And no, probably 5 years. Can you come to wake up and really know your mission and get passionate about life apart from pain? And ever since then, I've been watching. I've been looking at the people around me to see, like, okay, are you awake? Who's awake? Who's living alive and experiencing life to this fullness that is inspiring, and they're creating, and they're really capitalizing on literally life itself, their presence, the fact that they exist, they're making an impact. But how many of them are doing that without having to go through something devastating? So I would love to know from you guys, how many of you feel like you've actually really been able to create something impactful? And it doesn't have to be art or music. It doesn't have to be some invention. It can be literally creating life, creating a child. And man, your child, your kid, you just feel so much of a mission and a call to love your kid and raise them well. And they're not, here's the other thing. It's not that you're reliving your life through them and you get another chance at life because you now have a kid. I'm not talking about a surrogate you. I'm talking about finding meaning in creation without having to go through something hard. Most every single person that I have encountered has been able to create meaning and live awake on the other side of pain. It's like pain is the conduit. It's the vehicle to waking us up. And so I'm looking here in the chat. I'm so glad to see you're here. He says, okay, I'm just looking on Instagram first and let me hop over to YouTube. On the bright side, hello, I love this. In our home, we like to say living with intentionality. I love, love, love that. Matt, it takes discipline and consistency. My dad is a painter and struggles with this. I love that. So effectively, to not be only deriving creation from a source of pain, he's able to do that with discipline and consistency. I love that. The Raymer Brown. Apart from pain or apart from novelty at your expectations. Apart from pain. But what a beautiful way to say that, apart from novelty at your expectations. I'm so glad you're here, Adam, by the way. All right, so looking over here in the chat, let me check in here. Where are we at on YouTube? All right, just looking down here, playing catch up. All my dreams and aspirations got shut down at what I would say 35. All right, let me scroll up so I can have context. Edward. Yeah, those 3-letter agencies. Interesting. Perez, I remember you from somewhere. Have you ever been to Houston, Texas? Yes, my sister and her husband actually used to live there. Patrick says, "What's the title of your book?" I'm getting the impression that you're writing a book or that you did write one. I actually am meeting with my book editor Wednesday, and hopefully I'm done. That's my prayer. I've been writing this book for a very long time. It's like my capsule life project. All right, scrolling down. Paxton says, "I like being alone and channeling creativity, but my brain hates me." Oh my gosh. I do wonder, there is something so much so where it comes to literally being able to take a medication and get the balancing back. Or, I have heard so many incredible things about people who have been able to kind of self-heal depression and the chemical imbalances literally through meditation. I don't know meditation well enough, but I just know with the deep breathing and being able to kind of like learn how to control your mind when you have those thoughts, that's brought so much peace to so many people. The majority of people you mentioned were predominantly introverts and used their time how they wanted. Majority took naps and didn't do the normal schedule we do now, DJ says. What an interesting point. Well, first, I've never heard about the nap side of things, although I have heard of, I forget what culture this was. They were like, man, in the evenings, they would come home and nap for like 4 hours, and then they would wake up and do like, man, they would like do the evening. And a lot of creation came from the night, which I thought was so interesting. But I think you raised such a good point. And DJ, actually, I want to lean into that. You said they used their time how they wanted. And y'all, this is such a good mirror moment for all of us. How much of our time are we choosing how to spend versus it's being scheduled for us? I pulled up my calendar today, actually. I was like, holy cow, I have all these meetings because I gave out my calendar to somebody. It's for good reason. And all of a sudden I have all these random meetings and I'm like, okay, I need to take my time back because y'all, the thing about the expenditure of time, when we're thinking about, okay, what's the ROI for every single action? What's the return on the investment that I'm making intellectually? What's the return on investment I'm making emotionally? Because there are people that will drain us emotionally. There are meetings that we should not be in, that's draining us intellectually. We should not be spending our mind power on these topics and in these meetings. This is not for, so being an effective leader of our own lives, that's why business has so much to do with our own personal family, with the own way that we live our lives in general. Because if I know how to be aware of, okay, this is my target, this is how I measure success, I know what I'm good at, what I'm talented in, okay, I know how I want to achieve those goals. Now, all of a sudden, we start becoming the author of our own lives. We actually start being the ones to curate our calendars, and we curate the activities at home. We start being so keenly aware of what is life-giving to us, what depletes us, that is outside of my skill set and therefore not a good expenditure of my time. And because I'm not returning, I'm not getting a return on my investment of time, intellectually, emotionally, physically. Y'all, we need to know these things. I even, I'm looking at, and this is just an example because I really want us thinking this way. So if I want to get in shape, okay, well, what's my actual goal? What do I want to look like? How do I want to feel though? Because what I look like is kind of a vanity metric. But how do I want to feel? If I'm a mom and I'm going to have a baby, what muscles in my back and body do I actually need to be tending to so that I've got the strength to push out this child? And y'all, I love this example of childbirth because so many areas in our lives require a death in order for there to be new life. But it requires muscles. It requires training and learning how to allow for the death of the old to have the new come to life. For example, if you are actually wanting to get to the next level in your business and you're really wanting to get to, okay, I know that I actually need to scale back from these businesses. From these meetings, I know that I actually need to put new people in place. There needs to be a death of what's old. There needs to be a death of what's no longer working for your business, a death of the old systems, a death of even your own ego from attaching your involvement to the outcome of what you want it to look like, sound like, feel like. And so with the death of that, then I now need to be hyper aware of, okay, what needs to change in me emotionally to have even the humility to step back? What needs to change for me intellectually to hire the right person, ensure that they're filling in this void? I get to step back and then I reorient that expenditure of energy intellectually into the better and more proper, I guess you could say, action that yields then the real result that I'm looking for. So jumping back here in the chat, Christopher Adams says, it's kind of sad, to be honest, how some paintings don't become bestsellers until the artist passes, as if value is determined by the measure of life. Word. Dude. That is so beautifully said and so incredibly true. Wow. Yeah. Patrick said, just think if they had patented back in the day when the wheel was invented. Oh my gosh. That's so funny. Midwestern, hello. Jules. Romeo, put the phone down and go meet your neighbors. Do the community more good than this. I love that. Put your phone down and go meet your neighbors. Y'all, that's so wonderful. Okay, I love this. All right, so back to Instagram. Adam says, how are you defining pain? Kind of like defining love, where there are a few definitions. I freaking love you, Adam. Yes, absolutely. I was hosting a knowing retreat, and I had a few different couples with me, and I asked them, because we were talking about relationships, and I said, okay, how do you define love? Each couple, each person in the partnership wrote their definition. And every single person had a different definition from their counterpartner. And y'all, what's so dangerous then, to Adam's point of let's start with definitions. What are we working with here? The reason why that's so important is because you could spend 20 years in a marriage, and I've seen this happen. I'm loving you. I love you. You love me. We're trying to love each other. And my definition of love is entirely different from yours. My darling defines love as a verb because of his experience. And I define love as a noun because of my experience. I can sense when someone doesn't love me, even if they're doing the right thing. And for him, it was all the noun, supposedly, but his thing was that it was never shown. There was no verb. And so what we've come to, first, it was so important that we even realized that. That's huge. And so now it's okay, it's both, you know? But the thing is that if we hadn't ever really realized that, I could have been loving via the noun, you know, words of affirmation and experiences and all these things that have perhaps more to do with the noun, where for him, he's all verb, and maybe he would have been doing a lot of things, but never showing up for me in the way that I needed. So this definition of terms, Adam, I'm so glad. I love you, my friend. Later you say endurance of pain or negative event is a meditation or focus on joy. Endurance of pain or negative event is a meditation or focus of joy. And what a beautiful way to say that. So when we're talking about pain, when I'm saying, you know, have you found people in your life who have really been able to create something of value, of impact, of change in some semblance of communal life? Pain by way of, and so this is what's interesting. So in my book, Knowing, I start off with sharing the three moments in my life that really broke me. But it was only until the third reckoning that I really squared off with that pain. And it was emotional pain. You know, I lost my brother-in-law. And then my husband said he was thinking about leaving me. And then he finally left. So those 3 moments, but it was only until my husband really left where I was like, I need to face off with what this pain is inside of me, because otherwise I'm going to become bitter. I just knew I could see what would happen if I did not face the pain. And I also had seen what happened for 6.5 years after my brother-in-law. I was so devastated. Nobody had a clue because it was my sister's loss, and I just had all these narratives that were preventing me from getting the support I needed and even processing it myself. And so to that point, I really did not do the work to address pain. So that's how the book starts. We're talking about pain at an emotional level. You're left, you're abandoned, your partner dies. There's some thing externally in life that causes internal pain. But then as we move through the book, we talk about another layer of pain and Adam, you're just brilliant for asking me this question. So thank you, because this is exactly where we should have gone. And I'm so grateful for you. There's another layer of pain that every single one of us needs to experience. And I'm saying that, counter me if you disagree. I really actually believe this. I think that this might actually be a core value of mine. And I didn't even realize it until this moment. I think every single one of us needs to experience this kind of pain. And it is the pain of looking in the mirror, the pain of self-realization, of looking in the mirror and seeing ourselves for the entirety of who we are. It's effectively what happens when you remove the log out of your eye and look and see, oh my gosh, guys, I had really what this experience for me was, I had lived for 8.5 years in this marriage where I did everything I possibly could. I really did. I killed myself trying to make him happy and make him love me and please him and make his life wonderful. And, you know, I even said one time, I was like, I will, you know, if you want to go on your motorcycle, we can live abroad and go on our motorcycles all throughout, you know, Argentina and explore the world. And I'll have the business and it'll be wonderful. And I handed him this like golden platter, silver platter. And what I realized when I looked in the mirror, I realized that in all of that, you know, what was my 100% responsibility for why this relationship ended? Because I knew that if I did not look in the mirror, I would live, yes, become bitter, but also I would live as a victim. So by us looking in the mirror and being brave enough to square off with the pain we feel by looking at ourselves, we also come to realize that we have way more power in our lives than we ever thought. So much of what actually makes it so much harder to experience life is all of the control we've handed out to other people. You know, we give other people so much control, and then we wonder why we're not actually able to feel fulfilled, or why we're not actually able to be creative. To your point earlier, is that the people who were creative, these creative geniuses, actually were introverts and used time the way that they wanted. What an interesting point. And so in pain, what I'm talking about, pain, creation on the other side of pain. The pain that I mean is, yes, loss, but it goes even deeper than that. The pain of waking up, the pain of looking in the mirror and being like, holy cow, I didn't know. So what I saw when I looked in the mirror was that I had been living as a non-person. To your point, I was the complete opposite of the introvert who never used any time for themselves and thus was like a non-entity. And so there's the balance. It's the yin and the yang, right? It's the and that connects two seemingly opposing truths to allow for us to look at such a broad, big picture. So y'all, it's really, really interesting. Adam, you just took us down a beautiful point, or path. So thank you. Douglas James, oh, I'm so glad you're here. Just post our podcast, Curious to See the Growth. I'll send it to you. I actually have no idea where. I know I have it somewhere, but I'll send you the podcast. Adam says, borrowing from the verse, Jesus said, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross, despising the pain. What an interesting addition to this, you know? Are we willing to go through the pain to wake up and even see our own potential to begin with? Are we willing to look in the pain, because on the other side of pain is creation? I really believe that. And on the other side of pain is creation. It's weightlifting. You said that here. TIG, weightlifting can be a great practice. That requires pain. There's a sacrifice in waking up early. There's a sacrifice in the physical activity of like gaining muscle. Y'all, everything, man, here's the thing. Even in the pursuit of peace, to exist in the moment. And so here's where it actually gets a little bit, again, esoteric, I suppose, existential. To be honest, well, yeah. If we really want peace, this is where it comes to this level of like letting go. And really to what you were saying earlier about being in the now. Anthony said that earlier. It's leaning into the pain, squaring off with the person in the mirror, recognizing the truth, and letting go. And not becoming fixated. It's what Jordan Peterson talks about. And I know everyone has different opinions on him these days. I like OG Peterson. I actually don't really know what he's doing much, but he talks about this concept of staring into the abyss long enough that you eventually find the light. If you look long enough into the darkness, you will eventually see the light. And with that process, he actually talks, Adam, you brought up this story and an analogy of Christ. Christ not only died, but he went and captured the keys of redemption. He went all the way through hell to get the keys for the kingdom effectively. And so in us looking in and peering into the darkness and going through pain, we don't stop at the pain. We have to continue going to get to the other side for the light to shine through, for the life, for the beauty, for all that comes on the other side of pain, for the fulfillment of then being able to create. Because then here's what's so interesting is that in this process of leaning into the pain of existing in the darkness and getting to the side of light, then, and this reminds me of a quote from Viktor Frankl in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. There's the love that comes in and then through. So when we're willing to lean into the darkness long enough to then get to the light, then it's like, man, it permeates our soul. And we actually realize, this is what's so cool, is that in peering into the abyss and finding the light, we actually realize that part of the pain that's there is in direct proportion to the amount of purpose that's there. This is where people talk about gleaning purpose from pain. And in direct proportion to the shadow, let's say that what we see when we look in the mirror is this shadow and this darkness. That shadow is cast by the greatness of the light that's also there. And so that's where we have to be willing to look at both. We have to look at the beauty and the pain, the joy and the sorrow, the light and the darkness. Looking at both allows for the full picture of who you and I are. And so it's not about being obsessed or preoccupied with the darkness. It's about allowing for the fullness of the experience, the fullness of you and me, the fullness of what is, to be able to come forth. So I feel like we definitely, yeah, even the slightest light shines bright in the darkness. I love that. Mac, I'm going to put you on timeout because we don't talk like that, but thanks for being here. David Nurse. Patrick says, get yourself a stiff drink and think about your life and don't sugarcoat it. It's all there. It's all there, y'all. And it's really, really, really beautiful when we allow for, it's like a painting. It's like the painting produced from the pain of the artist. And it could be the pain of self-realization. It could be the pain of loss from something external. But until we allow for the pain to penetrate ourselves inside, will we then be able to access the light and access the creation that's on the other side of that. And to the extent where we're healed in the process, you know, obviously creation has come from pain and that artist stayed in kind of that torture. But man, if we want to alchemize the pain and create something beautiful that allows for meaning for all of us, not just those who benefit from the beauty created from the pain, but if we also want to live and find joy, like find peace. And isn't that so much of what we're promised when we're actually willing to engage at this level in life? So with that, y'all, thank you so much. This has been such a good conversation. I really have loved, I've really, really loved the conversation in return to this subject. So thank you all so much for hanging out with me tonight. Guy that comments, hello. It's not a painting without pain, he says. All right, Cray, I'm going to put you on timeout because we don't talk like that. Patrick, thanks for hanging out. The Flux. Oh, I don't know what's going on over here. But, Patrick, I love so much of what you've been saying. Sajid, hello. My mother always used to say, the older you get, the better you get, unless you're a banana. That is so cute. The Flux, thanks for joining, Scott. Y'all, thank you for hanging out. I'll see you tomorrow morning. I'll be back online tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern. We're going to be doing our daily lessons from A Course in Miracles. So with that, I'm going to hop off. Thank you for hanging out with me, and I will see you tomorrow. Good night.